This is Primary Stages Oral History Project, Off-Broadway Oral History Project. Today we are talking to Jennifer von Mayrhauser, costume designer. This is our 109th interview. It is Thursday, September 28th, 2017, and we are recording this at Casey Child's apartment on the Upper West Side. Welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Where did you grow up?
I was born in Ithaca, New York, where my dad was teaching at Cornell. And when I was about 18 months old, I moved to New Haven, where my dad was teaching at Yale. And he was a Sterling professor of Italian literature, of Dante and Petrarch and Boccaccio. And he was also the head of Timothy Dwight College, where I essentially grew up. And interestingly enough about that is that Timothy Dwight, they have what they call as a Chubb Fellowship program. So a lot of famous people stayed in my house, like Harry Truman and Adlai Stevenson and Moss Hart and Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater. And so I always think that was kind of good training for working with celebrities.
And tell us about what it was like being a kid running around. The students are there all the time, right?
Well, except in the summer there was no one there, and that was kind of like made it a great playroom. And I spent from the age of 5 to the age of 19. Well, I went off to Northwestern, but basically my dad was the head of the college for that amount of time. And it was really interesting, because it a lot of cocktail parties. And I have one sister, but she's 17 years older than me. So she was a freshman at Cornell when I was born. So it was me and my parents living in in the master's house, which is huge.
And you must have had a very rich cultural life in New Haven.
Well, I started going to the Schubert Theater very early. I saw a bunch of early plays like Fiorello and so many wonderful
on
plays.
Their way in to Broadway?
Having tryouts. Yeah. And I also got my first professional start in New Haven at a theater called the Theater in the Rink. I was an apprentice at the age of 16. It only had one season.
What was that?
It was a theater there's a rink that looks like a whale, and that's where it was, there in the rink. And I think my parents, my father was a famous scholar and also a famous poet. He was in fact the first poet laureate in space. He had a poem in an early satellite, and he was kind of a big deal.
Tell us your father's name.
Thomas G. Bergen.
Thomas G. Bergen.
Yeah. And he was actually born in New Haven, and so was my grandfather. They were Irish, and it's an interesting thing. But anyway, yes, my father was a big deal at Yale. I remember when I worked with Sam Waterston, Law and Order, he goes, "Your father is a big..." But anyway, so and so I always loved the theater. I went to boarding school, to Emma Willard School, and which is in Troy, New York, and it was the first school for women in the United States, started in 1814. A lot of famous people went there, like Jane Fonda, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, our senator. But anyway, so that was, and I did theater there.
And what kind of theater did they do there?
Oh, all kinds of plays. And
it was a women's school?
Yes. So we played men as well as women. And they had the most amazing costume collection. Should I look at you or look at you?
You can look at it.
So anyway, they had a big costume collection, but I didn't know I wanted to be a costume designer at that point. I just loved the theater. And my parents knew that I loved the theater, but they were like, I don't know. But then I went to work at Theater in the Rink after my junior year at Emma Willard. And I remember that as an apprentice, like at the end of every week, you'd have to strike the set, and stay up all night. So we all have been through this, right? All night. And, since it was in a rink, it was like sort of cement. And my mother was British and very proper, and but wonderful. But I remember at 7 o'clock in the morning, my first at the end of my first week at Theatre in the Rink, I heard my mother's heels going click, 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 click. I was like, here she comes, but she was like, well, you've been here for 24 hours and you need to come home. But I think that convinced them that I was very devoted.
And were you working that first summer with a professional job? Were you working as a costume designer?
No,
An apprentice.
An apprentice. I just did everything. And then the following summer, after I graduated from Emma Willard, I worked at Long Wharf in their premiere summer.
Oh, wow.
With John Joy as the artistic director.
And tell us about that.
It was pretty amazing. And I was in Little Mary Sunshine and I was in The Crucible. Because, again, I was an apprentice and I just did everything they told me to do. And
where were they?
In the same place.
The same space, the
yes.
warehouse?
Yes, and Arvin Brown was the head of the apprentices. He was in charge of all of us. And I think we did some kind of, I forget, not Our Town, but what's that other one that everyone does is the Apprentice Show. And it was a great experience, and I loved doing it. And that was my second professional. I was an apprentice.
And that was
1965.
65 at Regional Theater. Regional, or was it Long Wharf summer then?
Well, it started in the summer, but it continued. I only worked there in the summer, but
that's straight through. Yeah.
Still, that was the beginning of Long Wharf Theater.
What was it at the boarding school? Why did they have such a fantastic costume collection there?
No, well, because they'd been around since 1814.
These were all their own stock?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we'll get to it later, but in the 70s, sort of late 70s, I did a lot of PBS dramas, period PBS dramas about, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, as a matter of fact, and Edith Wharton, all these. And I used to go to Emma Willard and they'd loan me these original costumes from like 1880s, just really terrible. But anyway, I was happy to borrow them. But anyway, there's that. So I worked at Long Wharf, and I loved working there, and I loved being an apprentice. And then I had just graduated from Emma Willard, and I actually went, I already knew I was going to Northwestern, but I got a scholarship to go through the English-speaking union. I got a scholarship to go to school in London for a year. And I remember the English-speaking union had this relationship between boarding schools in the United States and boarding schools in England. But when I went to my interview, which was, I don't know, I was always very shy, but I had all these heads of school, but I just was like determined. And I said, well, you have to forget this boarding school stuff. I need to go to a day school in London so I can go to the theater. And that's what I did. I went to a school called Francis Holland, which is at the top of Baker Street. And I went to the theater all the time. And I was also involved in the National Youth Theater.
Wow. And where are you in your schooling now?
I graduated from Emma Willard. This is like a gap year. But I knew I was going to Northwestern, and I interviewed for this, and I got this scholarship. It was called the Isabel Carden Griffith Schoolgirl Scholarship. And I went to Francis Holland, which is a school in London to this day. And but it was like a gap year. I already knew I was going to Northwestern.
I want to go back to the London gap year. Before that, back in New Haven, were there other theaters that you went to, or other influences that you had, or events that you saw there that?
Well, just the Schubert Theater, really, because there wasn't anything else.
There was no Yale rep.
I never went to Yale rep. I knew of people at the drama school, but I didn't.
Student productions at all?
No, never. Oh, but, I went to, the Yale Dramat shows. Like some of them were done on TV, and, I went to them, I went to some of those.
Some of them were done at your college.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that that's what influenced me.
Yeah.
I would say doing plays at Emma Willard really influenced me. I mean, Emma Willard to this day is a really wonderful school, and was great for me. And I had gone to the Foote School in New Haven before that.
So
Foote School, which is a private grade school. And anyway, so that is really through Emma Willard that I became interested in the theater.
And then the year in London. You just wanted to see theater all the time. Yeah. What did you see?
Oh my God. Well, I went to the National Theater, and I saw Othello with you know, I saw all these amazing plays, Albert Finney and A Flea in Her Ear, and
I love
Armstrong's Last Good Night with Albert Finney, and I just saw lots of plays. And I also went to these meetings for the National Youth Theater. I never performed or did anything, but I was involved with people in the National Youth Theater. So I just went to as many things as I could. My school, Francis Holland, which is quite a posh school, they didn't have theater, but that's okay. They were like, you know, I was able, and I lived with families.
And what were you studying there?
Well, I had to put down, you know, to me, the fact that I already knew I was going to Northwestern kind of influenced me. But you put down your interest, and I was always interested in theater, but they didn't have theater. But I was also interested in Russian history, and I remember they didn't have Russian history, so they made me take Russian language, which is a nightmare from hell, and British Constitution A-level, which I could manage. But in fact, I remember I was supposed to take an O-level. This is not to do with theater, but I was supposed to take an O-level at Francis Holland, and in Russian language. And the headmistress's name is Mrs. Brigstock. She was very scary. And I went to her and I said, you know, I already know I'm going to Northwestern University. Do I really have to take the O-level in Russian language? And she's like, well, in England we do take exams. And so that was that nightmare. I couldn't do it. But anyway, but I loved going there. It was fun. It wasn't as good as Emma Willard. It was much more kind of specialized, like nothing. Emma Willard, we were taught to correlate. It's interesting. I just did an interview with the Emma Willard Alumni Magazine, and I was talking about this. We were taught to correlate all our subjects, which actually had really, if you fast forward, has helped me so much in terms of costume design. But when I got to Francis Holland, they didn't think that way, so that's fine. But I did see a lot of plays, so many plays I couldn't even remember to tell you what they all are. But it was really fun, and I enjoyed myself. I learned a lot.
And where were you living in London?
I lived with 3 different families. I lived in St. John's Wood. I lived in Golders Green. I lived in Marylebone. And then, and I had a problem with some of my families because I was a know-it-all kind of American teenager. I'm sure it was their fault too, but I met a family that lived in Golders Green, and their daughter, who lives in Scotland now as a doctor, she was going to Emma Willard, and I went to see them, and they were like, I was like poured out my troubles with my families, and so I ended up living with them. So that was good.
And then after the year in London?
I went to Northwestern.
Right to Northwestern?
Yes.
Was there a summer job there? Or?
No, I remember I lived with a family in France for a month to practice my French, and which is gone. I also, you know, I lived in Italy for a year when I was 7 because my dad was a professor of Italian, and I used to go to Europe every other summer with my parents because my mother was British. She was actually born in Calcutta, which is interesting. And my father went to Italy every other year to, you know, because he had a lot of contacts there. So,
where in Italy?
Well, all over, but the year that I lived there was in Rome. But where I've returned to many times, I love it there. But yeah, so I don't know, how did I get off on that? Oh yes, I lived with a French, I've forgotten Italian. I lived with a French family for a month in Bordeaux. They had a summer house the summer after I finished at Francis Holland. So I really didn't do any theater that summer. And in fact, once I went to Northwestern, I know the summer after my freshman year, I worked at the Yale Library in the archives, I think just to make money. But then I did do summer stock after my junior year and my senior year at Northwestern at a place called the Troupe of American College Players, which is in Grand Lake, Colorado. That was really fun. I did acting, I did backstage, I did, you know. And Peter Friedman and I were in that
Yes,
company
tell us a
together.
little bit more about that now.
Well, it was
in Grand
Lake, Colorado, which was, you know, I had spent so much of my life in Europe, and this was so exotic to me to be in the Rockies, and it was beautiful.
Close to what big city in Colorado?
Estes Park, I'd say, is the closest. Do you know where that is?
No.
No, up it was 8,000 feet, but of course we all could sing and dance, which because we were all 18 or 19.
And you were performing?
Performing and working backstage.
Uh-huh.
And I'm still really good friends, with Peter Friedman. I'm friends with him. And then an actress who doesn't live in New York anymore named Suzanne Lederer was there. And David Hasselhoff was also an apprentice, but that was good.
And tell us about Northwestern. You got in as a theater major?
Yeah, I was a theater major.
Uh-huh. And was it called a theater major?
Yes.
It was. All right.
And when I got in, there were like 100 theater majors. And I remember Mr. Schneiderman, who was a teacher there, he said to all of us, remember Mr. Schneiderman? He said to all, you'll probably have the same experience. He gets up in front of this 100 theater majors, and he says, none of you are going to end up working in the business, right? Because you don't have what it takes. Well, when someone says that to me, I'm like, I do.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, people sort of started, because we had so many crew hours to do and so much, you can relate to this, so much stuff to do constantly that a lot of people left being theater majors and became TV and television majors, or what is it called, radio, which ironically I've gone to do TV as well as theater, but not me, I stuck it out. And there were like 10 of us at the end. Is that what happened when you went there? No.
It was always like that crew.
But were you there with the famous Elena?
The year after.
Oh, yeah.
It's a long story.
And who were the other faculty then?
Sam Ball was a design teacher, actually, and I really didn't know I wanted to be a costume designer at that point, but he was my advisor, and he kind of said, well, why don't you take this class? He kind of got a sense of that I might want to do this before I did, and so he was very influenced, and I don't know, Mr. Scheidemann, I can't remember.
Albina Krause was
No, she's way before my time, although...
Oh, she was?
Yeah.
What year did you get there?
66.
66.
She was there, I guess 65 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I know Marshall Mason, and
Yes.
Dennis Parachute, they were there like 10 years before me. So,
okay.
yeah. And she was there with them. But she might as well have been there because she hung over the department.
Yeah, and many of her students were still there, I think, teaching, like David Dukes.
I never had him as a teacher.
Yeah. So what memorable plays did you do at Northwestern?
I did. Live Like Pigs, I think, is a British play. Can't remember the play, right? I did, I did the Threepenny Opera. Now, the funny thing is, and when I was at the theater in the Rink, I played the young whore, much to my parents' regalia. But by the time I got to Northwestern, I played the old whore. So that was the end of my acting career. But anyway, yeah. So, I don't know, yeah. It's kind of a blur. And also a lot was going on, with Kent State and a lot of politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you finished at Northwestern.
And I liked Northwestern, but not nearly as much as I liked Emma Willard, let's put it that way. Because Emma Willard is very inspiring. And Northwestern, I just learned to work really hard so that when I got to New York, I thought, God, this is nothing compared to Northwestern.
Did you make trips to New York? You must have made trips to New
All the
York
time, because I
while you were growing up in New Haven.
All the time. Saw Broadway shows and stuff.
Did your parents brought you in to see Broadway shows?
Yeah.
Any off-Broadway during that time that you recall?
No. Well, yeah, actually, because my parents had a friend named Peter Gillingham who was quite a character, and he and his wife lived in the Village. And I remember I went to visit them, and I saw some plays, when I was there. So I saw some off-Broadway. But, it's funny. I just love the theater. I didn't go around going, I have to do Broadway, I have to do off-Broadway. I just wanted to work in the theater. sort of, went to New York and thought.
So when you finished at Northwestern,
After my senior year, I did my second year at the troupe of American players. And then I went to Europe for 6 months and kind of
6
traveled.
months just to tour Europe.
Yeah.
And how was that?
Fun. I was supposed to go to Columbia, actually, funnily enough. I was going to go to Columbia, I think in the acting program. I got in to go to grad school. And at the last minute, I decided not to go, and I went to Europe instead.
And you just toured countries. And at the end of that tour?
Moved to New York. February of 1971.
1971, and where did you live when you first moved here?
I very first lived out in Long Island at my friend Suzanne Lederer from the Troupe of American College Players' parents' house for maybe a couple of weeks. And then I got an apartment at 165 Christopher Street, and I lived there for about 7 years.
And where is that on Christopher Street?
Christopher in Washington, way west.
Way west.
That's where
but you must be
Marshall.
Close to the Cherry Lane, and not to the Lucille Lortel Theater.
Yes, just a few blocks west of that. And I worked at the Lucille Lortel.
Uh-huh.
I think the first play I did there was called Augusta. I bet that's not on that list either.
So tell us about, you arrived in New York in 71, living on first on Long Island and then Christopher Street. And how did
one thing I knew when I came was that I didn't want to be an actor, that I wanted to work, in the theater, but not be an actor. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know I wanted to be a costume designer.
Right.
And in fact, this is a little bit embarrassing to admit, but I just took odd jobs. That's not embarrassing. But then I went and interviewed at the New York Shakespeare Festival to work there in the summer. And I thought, well, I'll work in the prop department. So they said, well, we don't have any space in the prop department, but you can work in the costume shop. And that's how I got involved in costumes.
Why is that embarrassing to admit?
It's just funny because it's not really embarrassing.
What did they have as a costume shop then?
Well, it was run by this amazing man named Milo Moro. And, I got to meet costume designers. In fact, I worked as a costume painter at the beginning because I was always a hard worker thanks to Northwestern and probably Theater in the Rink and staying up all night. And so Milo Moro, who was not the easiest man to work for, he always was very nice to me, and he would give me lots of different jobs to do. But he'd say, like, I need this dyed and I need this color, and the dye boxes are in the back. He wouldn't teach me. I did kind of teach myself. But I worked with different costume designers. Funnily enough, I worked with Carrie Robbins. I met her there, and I worked with her as an assistant off and on for about a year. And I also did one time assisting Santa LaQuasto there, who I went on to do. I've done many shows with him over the years, and we're friends. But I realized early on, and then I started to go to the Studio and Forum of Stage Design, Lester Polikoff's school at night, because I thought, well, I think I should be a designer.
Where was that?
It was in the Village, and Pat Ziprad taught there, and Jane Greenwood, and it's quite a well-known. It doesn't exist anymore. But I used to go there at night to take classes, because I decided, well, when I was working for Carrie, and I just decided thought I would really like to be a costume designer, and I thought it was really interesting, and so I studied there.
And when you say you began as a costume painter,
yes, and a dyer.
Some of the designing and things, some of the dyeing and things I can see you doing with little help at painting.
Well, I think I worked with. I designed classes at Northwestern, and I knew how to paint. But also, I think there was a guy named Tim Miller who ran. I don't know what became of him, but kind of dealt with the sort of craft side, and he just taught me. So, but I didn't do that for terribly long. But yeah, and then I worked with Carrie.
So, what were your first shows? And what did you see in New York those first few years that really stuck with you?
Well, I didn't see that much theater. I kind of just worked really hard.
Were you working other jobs, or
No, only in
you
the
were able
theater.
to make your living in theater from the start?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I was married to Peter von Mayrhauser, who was the stage manager from 1971 to about 1978. And then I've been married to Richard Cottrell from 1982. I'm still married to him. So anyway, I knew him from Peter from Northwestern. I just worked really hard, and I did a lot of different jobs. But I think the first show I ever designed, and I've been trying to think of the name of it, and I've gone into the archives. It was at the Cubiculo.
Uh-huh.
But like the second thing,
And the Cubiculo was where?
on the west side somewhere. They have an archive at they've got an archive. I looked it up, but they don't have a list, so I didn't have it. But anyway, then the next thing I did was I did Crystal and Fox at the McAlpin Rooftop Theater. And that I had to co-design because they considered that I wasn't experienced enough, which of course I wasn't. But I was a little miffed that I had to co-design it. But anyway, so I did that.
And where is the
McAlpin Rooftop, which is on that list, was at the McAlpin Hotel on 34th Street on the roof. So anyway, I did that. Now, the set designer of that was a guy named Phil Gilliam. Phil Killian was a friend of mine from Northwestern who's passed away, but that's this guy's name, Phil Gilliam. And he told me, he said, I'm going to do a play at Circle Rep uptown. Do you want to come and meet Marshall Mason? So I did, and that's how I connected with Marshall.
And you must have had something to talk about, and that you were both graduates of Northwestern, although you later than, or
he also went to Northwestern 10 years before me.
Uh-huh.
I think we just talked about Marshall, and talked about the theater.
And
I used to say that I had worked as a designer for 5 years, even though I hadn't really.
Tell us about that space on Broadway and
It was on the second floor.
83rd or so.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's on the second floor, and it was like a big open space. Just remember the name of that play that I couldn't remember. Not the one at the Curriculo, but another one at Circle. It was Charlie Contraire, it was called. Charlie Contraire.
Uh-huh.
And it was written by, I want to say Roy London. He was another person. He went on, he's passed away, but he went on to be a famous casting director. You know who that is, Roy London.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, his brother Chuck London is a sound designer. But anyway, so yeah, I went to meet Marshall. I don't remember the meeting particularly. And the first play I ever did there was called Prodigal with Judd Hirsch and Zane Lasky were in.
And Marshall was directing.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Although I didn't always, but then I just became like the resident costume designer. I just did every single play. Like, I did him, which I mentioned, which was directed, I think, by Marshall Oglesby, I want to say. He was a sort of, and then the Persians, Rob Thurkiel. I did Sea Marks, I think that was Marshall. I did just a lot of plays there.
How long did they, the Glory, or the Mound Builders, was that there?
No, the Mound Builders was at Sheridan Square.
Okay, so then they moved it down
The
there.
first play I ever did at Sheridan Square, and that's when I first worked with John Lee Beatty, who's my dear friend to this day, and we've worked many times together.
Uh-huh.
And he's like an uncle to my daughters and granduncle to my granddaughter. And we've just worked many, many times together, even more than me and Don Scardina. But anyway, I remember the day that I met him. He was designing Battle of Angels, which is the first play I did at Sheridan Square. But I met him uptown. I guess he came for a meeting or something. But yeah, the first.
And who wrote Battle of Angels?
Tennessee Williams. And
Uh-huh.
he came to see it too. And he gave me a costume note.
And
And I was terrified.
and who directed
Marshall.
it? And what was the costume that Tennessee Williams gave you?
Well, Marshall said to me, well, Jennifer, Tommy, I think he was always called Tommy, you know. He has a note for you. I was like, oh. I was terrified because, you know, I was like 25 years old. I thought, oh no, what have I done? And apparently, Tennessee or Tommy, whatever you want to call him, there, you know, Battle of Angels has this sort of hunky man in the lead role. So Marshall says, well, he wants you to put the leading man in a see-through shirt. So I just had this moment of, I was like, oh, I get it. And that was kind of a funny kind of light bulb moment for me. So anyway, yes, it was written by Tennessee Williams. And I think he rewrote it into Orpheus Descending, Battle of Angels.
Yeah.
And Tanya was in it. The usual people. Yeah. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. But then I went on to do many, many plays.
Do you remember that space down on Sheridan Square?
Really well, yes.
All right. What was it?
It's now a restaurant.
First, yeah, oh, yes. When you first went in, was it a theater or established theater already?
No, it was just a space. And in fact, what was beautiful about Circle Rap, and John Lee was a part of this, is that he used to just shift it around all the time. I remember I did a play called Harry, that's may not be on there either, called Harry Outside, where John just refigured the whole space so it seemed like an outdoor space with like seats around. Whereas like Battle of Angels, I remember, you know, was sort of one wall and around, and then, you know, Serenading Louis was like seemed like a proscenium facing, you know.
Tell us about Serenading Louis.
That's Lamford. I did a lot of Lamford's plays.
And what was the first play you did with Lamford?
The first play that I ever did with Lamford? I think it might have been
Louis.
It might have been Serenading Louis, but
The Mound Builders.
that was after that.
Oh, uh-huh.
I just took a little notes here. And maybe. Let's see, I did The Persians, I did Prodigal, I did Him, I did The Early Girl, that came a little later, The Battle of Angels, Knock Knock, I don't know if these are all on here, Angels Fall, 1982. That's Lamford. Mound Builders, 74. Oh, Mound Builders is the first one, the Tyler's Folly, Serenading Louis. But I first worked with Lamford when he acted in Him by E. Cummings.
Oh, and how was that?
It was fabulous. It took place in the 20s, and, you know.
And he was one of the actors.
Yes. He was the lead actor. He played E. Cummings.
Was he writing plays at that
Yeah,
time?
oh, definitely. I think he never acted before or after, but I guess because it was E. Cummings, you know, another playwright, they persuaded him to. Yeah, yeah.
And how about Knock Knock?
That was really great, and that was my first Broadway show too.
It moved from there to Broadway.
Yes, yes.
And this was This would have been.
I wrote down the dates of that one, and it was interesting because Marshall directed it, and then it was 1975, and then it moved to Broadway, and they fired a lot of the actors It opened on Broadway and it was doing fine, and Nancy Snyder was in it, and Judd Hirsch was in it, and Dan Seltzer was in it, and all these actors. But then they had the Tonys, and they were nominated, but they didn't win. So Harry Rigby, who was the producer, he fired like Nancy Snyder and replaced her with Lynn Redgrave. He fired Marshall, and he replaced him with famous director who used to do tons of O'Neill. I don't know why he wasn't.
Jose Contreras.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which is funny because it's a comedy, and I'm sure he could do a comedy.
It's a comedy. It's Jules Pfeiffer, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was my first Broadway experience, was all of that, and then I had to kind of redesign it. Part of it. Yeah.
But was the play open and up on Broadway by that time?
Yes, it was.
And did he think this was going to, I guess, boost ticket sales?
Yes. Yes.
Were
I
these
just was like,
People that he brought in were stars.
Judd, he stayed in it because
Yeah.
he was a star. Yeah, and Lynn Redgrave. And
And when did the TV career start? About this time or later?
well, it had different forms. The first television I ever did was The Mound Builders, actually, that Marshall directed for PBS for Theater in America.
Yeah.
And I did Uncommon Women and Others for Theater in America. And I did,
And
Yes.
Uncommon was Wendy Wasserstein.
yes. And I did for Colored Girls, funnily enough, for PBS also, that Oz Scott directed. He was the original director.
Did you do Colored Girls originally?
No.
But you did it when they did it on television.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then I did quite a few kind of period dramas. I did Under the Sky, Elizabeth Cady Stanton in Kansas with Irene Worth. I did Edith Wharton story. I did a mini-series of Huckleberry Finn that was shot in Kentucky with a lot of, like Barnard Hughes and a lot of stars. And that was really fascinating. And so that was the kind of television I was doing, was sort of like theater television, kind of.
When they did the theater on television, the PBS WNET stuff, where did they do that? Did they bring that into a studio?
No, Mound Builders was shot in Southern Illinois on location. Yeah.
And they must have had to reconfigure the script, or not? Or?
Well, Lanford was there, but not that much. They had a house and, a little bit. And Brad Dourif was in it, and Jonathan Hogan, and Trish Hawkins, the Circle people. Yeah, and then for Colored Girls was shot in Miami, and it was all
Miami?
yes, it was all locations. It was not on stage. It was really kind of fabulous, and it opened with Ntozake Shange kind of being the narrator. So that was interesting. And Uncommon Women and Others was shot at Trinity College on a set and outdoors on location. The only thing I remember I also did for CBS Cable, I did, I don't think any of the theater stuff, I never did a PBS drama that was Theater in America. I did Guests of the Nation. In fact, that's how I met my husband, Richard, because that had been done at the Astor Place Theater. I did not design it, but it was done for Theater in America, and that was shot with Frank Converse, and Richard was in it. It took place in Ireland in 1918. It was a Frank O'Connor short story. Guests of the Nation, it was shot on location in Connecticut. So I think every Theater in America thing that I did with Jack Fenso, they were all basically, they just made them on location. They didn't do them in a theater. I remember I did something called Kiss Kiss Darlings that Wendy Wasserstein wrote. It was was for PBS, and that was sort of in a set. But mostly and that was a good way for me to learn about doing film and television, which I didn't know what I was doing. But learned quickly. But I'm not sure anyone else knew what they were doing either. But yeah.
The tribute to Lily Lamont.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That was at Circle. And that was kind of fabulous. And that lead actress, what's her name? I was thinking about her this morning, as a matter of fact. She was so beautiful. She had kind of white hair, sort of platinum blondish white hair. Anyway, it was fun to do, and it was period, but I just can't remember much more.
And Marcia was directing.
Yes.
Ashes at the Public.
Lynn Meadow directing, with Brian Murray and Roberta Maxwell.
Now you're moving away from, or you're
I
moving
was
away
always,
from Circle.
I was always doing other stuff.
And they knew you at the Public.
Yeah, at the Public. Well, I don't know if they put it together that I worked in a costume shop, but the first thing I did at the Public is Leave It to Beaver is Dead, written and directed by Des McAnoff. and with Diane Wiest and Mandy Patinkin and Saul Robinek. And then I did Ashes. And then I did the Wakefield plays that Israel Horowitz wrote.
And what do you remember about those experiences?
They were wonderful. I mean, it was so fun to do Leave It to Beaver's Dead. It was kind of rock and roll. And at that time, Des McAnuff, who was like a skinny rock and roller, he had a band, and at the end, the band played. It was really fun. And then this was the first time. I had worked uptown at Manhattan Theater Club as well.
Uh-huh.
I was working at Manhattan Theater Club as well as Circle Rep. And so I knew Lynn Meadow from there, and it was fun to do Ashes with her. And Johnny did the set. And but I think I did some things at Manhattan Theater Club before I did Ashes with her, up when it was on the east side.
And they were just getting that space together then,
Yes.
right? It
Yeah.
was still just sort of
Yes.
settling.
I think I did something called Close a Play. I did the Miss Firecracker contest that Beth Henley wrote, and Stephen Tobolowsky directed.
That had to have been later. No,
That was at uptown.
yeah,
Yeah, not much later. So it was before Manhattan Theater Club moved.
right.
Yeah. I did a lot of things when they moved also, and I'm still doing a lot of things for them.
Talk a bit about Uncommon Women and Others.
Well, that was really kind of a wonderful experience because it was really, I loved Wendy, and it was kind of about people that were my age and with experiences that I had, and so I really related to it. It was a wonderful experience. And I did it at the Phoenix Theater with Steve Rodman directing, and then I did it for PBS with Steve Rodman directing.
And Phoenix Theater was located not at the Phoenix Theater at this time.
No.
It was at Marymount
Yes,
College,
that's
right?
right. And I did a few plays there. Let me remind myself what I did there.
Bonjour la bonjour.
That was at the Guthrie.
Oh.
I did about 6 or 7 plays at the Guthrie too.
How about Beyond Therapy? That's a little
That
bit
was
later.
there. No, Beyond
I
Therapy
saw
was
that
at the
production,
Phoenix.
81.
Yes, Jerry Zaks.
Wonderful. Jerry
Yes.
Zaks directing.
Yes.
With the walls.
Yes,
Swerved. Yeah.
And I did that on Broadway also, but John Madden was directing
Yeah.
and Jerry Zaks.
Uh-huh. And the original Beyond Therapy was Sigourney Weaver and Kate McGregor Stewart.
That's right. Well, she was in both productions.
She was in both of them, yeah.
But I think I did it. You know, I was thinking about this morning. I know I did another play at the Phoenix. Just can't remember, with Maureen Anderman.
Uh-huh.
Can't remember the title.
Yeah, that's all right. How about The Diviners at Circle Rep?
That was really fun. I loved that play. I did that at Circle Rep, and I also did it. It was remounted up at Saratoga Springs,
Oh.
as well as a production of The Seagull that was also at American Place that Marshall directed. That was also done in Saratoga.
And Tally's Folly?
That was done. I did that at Circle Rep, and I did it on Broadway too.
And that was Trish
Hawkins and Judd Hirsch.
And
yes.
Judd Hirsch.
And John Lee and Dennis Parashee. Yeah.
And did
Marshall.
you suspect that was going to become the hit that it became, or?
I don't really think that way.
Uh-huh.
I really loved doing it, and I thought it was a wonderful play. So I wasn't surprised,
Right.
you know, but I didn't. I learned early on that I just like to exist in the moment and do what I'm doing and not think, oh, this might move.
Yeah.
Because that always is, you know, it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not a great way to see the work.
Yeah, better
Yeah.
to just experience the work. So.
Yeah.
But I'd love Tally's Folly, and I'm glad it was such a big success.
Did these, like Circle Rep or, well, maybe the public, but they didn't have a shop to work in or to build
The public
in,
had a
did they?
shop,
Public did, but
not Circle.
Phoenix
No,
and Circle and...
no, just kind of had to kind of scrap it together. You know, I remember at Circle, I finally got them to get, because I worked on so many plays there. I got, when they had a office on West 4th Street, and they had a little room they gave me to work out of. But the funny thing was, it was next to somebody who did primal scream therapy. So I had to kind of get used to the screaming. But Yeah, but a lot of them didn't have shops, and in a certain situation, or Manhattan Theater Club always had a shop. Did it have a shop in town? That I don't remember. But Phoenix, no. But sort of job things out, or just,
Were there
circles certainly.
collections to pull from, or
Around and about, yes.
the costume collection was not established?
Yes,
then?
it was.
They were?
Yes. They were up on 125th Street. I didn't use them all that much,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was kind of scary to go there. It was on 125th. It
Why?
was dangerous there.
Huh.
Hard to believe now, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that makes sense.
I think I can. Were they always on 125th?
Yes.
I
Until
think,
they moved.
I
yeah.
think I can
To
remember
move down to 24th Street or whatever.
going to the costume collection for pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there were things all over the place, or I borrowed things, or I built things myself, or I had people build things. I mean, it's costume design.
And then going a little bit into the early 80s with Circle Rep. You did Weekends Like Other People. I saw that production.
Yes.
I think that was one of the last productions that the Phoenix did.
That's the one I was trying to think of.
Weekend Like Other People.
Yeah.
It was Rose Gregoria, I think.
Yes, it was.
And
And Ulu Grosbar directed it.
directed it.
Yeah.
How about Angels Fall?
That was originally done in 1982 at a theater festival in Miami at the Coconut Grove, I think.
Uh-huh.
That's where I first did it, and then it was done. I think it was done at Circle Rep too,
It was a Circle Rep, I saw
and
it
then
there.
but it was also on Broadway.
Then it moved to Broadway.
Yeah.
I think Lucille moved it.
Yes, but I think it was originally done at this theater festival in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been. It was definitely like the spring of 1982. I was wondering, I guess I did many plays at Circle in the Square under Ted Mann, but that was Broadway, I guess, technically.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
What, go ahead. Where did you start working with Circle in the Square?
Around the same time.
Uh-huh.
I did a lot of plays there.
And did you work with them downtown at all?
No, never.
On Bleecker Street?
No.
Uh-huh. And what were the shows you did at...
I did John Gabriel Borkman with Irene Worth.
Uh-huh.
I did something called The Boys of Autumn with John Cullum and George C. Scott.
Mhm.
I did another Tennessee Williams, Night of the Iguana with Jane Alexander and Maria Tucci. I did a couple of others. I'd have to look it up. Sorry. Too many plays.
The what?
Too many plays.
Let's take a little break. Before we go back to the plays of this period, did you, in your early days of designing off-Broadway, were you ever in a situation where you just said, this isn't working, this just isn't, this, I gotta get the clothing on the people and say, I gotta rethink this whole thing? What was your,
I just
what
want
was
to
one
tell
of your
you,
biggest challenges you had to?
I will tell you that my personality is such that I forget the bad.
That's great.
So I'm not really good at answering that question.
Uh-huh.
I very rarely. I mean, I remember I did a children's show at Circle called something Jules, or that's not on there either. And I was very upset, and it wasn't Dennis doing the lighting and the colors. the costumes are very polluted by the lighting designer, and I can't remember who it was. And I was a little upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, the whole Knock Knock experience was sort of, eye-opening. I remember that, in Knock Knock there's Cinderella, and there's also Joan of Arc. And when I had to have a new Cinderella outfit made for Lynn Redgrave, that the new director wanted, we just, of course, it's understandable. And but I remember Harry Rigby, the producer, the one who fired everybody, may he rest in peace. He was like, "But Jennifer," when the bids came in to build this, Brooks Van Horn or wherever. I used to get things done at Brooks Van Horn, just by the side. You were asking about that, but
and that was pricey, wasn't it? Usually,
it depended.
Yeah.
But anyway, this, was a Broadway show. So when the bids came in, he said to me, "But Jennifer, rags are so expensive." I always remember that. But anyway, that was kind of a learning experience. But I just figured, well, this must be what Broadway's like, where they just change directors and actors, kind of go with the flow. Mm-hmm. There were situations. I can think of 2 situations, and I'm not going to tell you what the plays were, but where the playwrights were terrible alcoholics. One of them, a British, one at Manhattan Theatre Company. I'm not going to tell you what the play was. Yeah. He's passed away now, but he just would go through a whole, and he was mean. So sometimes people could be mean, getting mean kind of notes, but really not that much. Pretty much positive. Great. Occasionally we've all been through that, but
yeah. I guess I would just worry that there's going to be that one time that you're going to go in and you suddenly go, the costumes don't match the set, or the set don't match the lights, or
you try to work with the set designer so it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That children's show, I can't remember the name of it, that's what happened, but pretty much, try to work very closely with the set designer, at least converse, and to this day, and try not to do that.
Mm-hmm. About this time, it was great.
Not to say that everything's always perfect, but I can't think of something where I was like, "Oh no, this is a disaster." No.
It was great to have Circle Rep always kind of as a touchstone company you could go back to. And you were working all those years. Yes,
although there came a time when I sort of stopped. I only occasionally. Tally's Folly actually was after this. Mm-hmm. And I remember Lamford called me, but there came a time where I had done a lot of other things, and Marshall hired Laura Crow, who did a lot of designing, and I did not really work at Circle for a long time. But I did go back to do Tally's Folly and to do occasional things like The Early Girl. But that thing where I just did one show after another came to an end. I want to say,
whose show was Early Girl?
It's written by a woman. I'd have to look that up.
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And then you did, in '83, The Seagull at American Place Theatre.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
And I did another play at the American Place, too, that I was trying to remember about the Holocaust. It wasn't a perfect example. I'm lucky to have done quite a bit of Chekhov. With Emily McCarter, I think I mentioned that I've done 40 shows with Emily.
When did you start working with Emily?
At the end of the 70s. And at the Guthrie.
Yeah.
At the Glass Menagerie. And then, I think it's been almost 30 years she's been at McCarter. And I did I've done many, many, many plays with her at McCarter, including this wonderful production of The Three Sisters, which had Fran McDormand in it. And that was wonderful. But The Seagull, it was okay. It was not a perfect production. But it was,
And you were working in on 46th Street there in the
American Place.
The basement theater downstairs.
Yeah.
Miss Firecracker, which I saw, was 73. It says stage 73.
Well, that was done originally uptown, and then it moved off Broadway. You know, it started at the Manhattan Theater Club uptown,
Right.
and then it moved to, I think,
West Side Art.
the West Side Arts.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That was a wonderful experience. I love doing Beth Henley. Her plays speak to me. I did another play, The Lucky Spot, at Manhattan Theater Club also, and I love her plays. I loved doing Miss Firecracker.
Now, elaborate on that.
But
They
I love
speak
working
to you and what?
Well, because the way she writes, this gets to what I love about costume design. Is a little hard to express, but she writes. You think, well, she's writing about wacky characters, but actually, it's very truthful what she writes, and I love sort of interpreting that. It's the best I could put it. And I love doing the Miss Firecracker contest, and I love working with Holly Hunter. And I actually also worked with Holly on The Wake of Jamie Foster, which I did at Hartford Stage and then moved to Broadway in 1982, which is also Beth Henley. And then after that, I did The Lucky Spot. And I worked a lot with Beth Henley when her plays were directed by Steve Tobolowsky. But I just, there's something about her writing, it really speaks to me, and there's this sort of aspect to what I do where I can't even always express it in words, which is just kind of about the characters and expressing the characters through the clothes. Mm-hmm. And there's something about her plays where I find that very inspiring. Lamford's a little that way too.
Zany about her.
Yes, but it's a trap to try to design her as if she's zany.
Yeah.
You really have to be kind of truthful to what she writes and not be zany.
Uh-huh.
But if the zaniness comes out of the character that she writes, then it's okay.
Uh-huh.
I find that so interesting.
And you also found Lamford spoke to you.
Yes, there was something about the sort of imagery of his plays and that I found. I felt I was really lucky because even though I went to the Lester Polikoff studio school, I really learned about designing from working at Circle Rock. Because I was working with an acting company and I was working with designers and with directors, and we were all, as a kind of collaboration, creating these productions. To go back to Emma Willard, actually, where I was taught to sort of think in a correlating way, to use that word again, which something that always inspired me there. And I've always used that in terms of how I work as a designer. So at Circle, I sort of learned, really got my chops as a designer from that kind of collaboration with all those people. Mm-hmm. So then I felt as if I took that other places, including to Law and Order, I will say.
But you had the advantage of knowing the people, in many cases, before you had a design for them.
Yes,
so
that's right.
You knew all of that.
That's right.
And you were bringing that with you. So
But also, I've always been I've worked on a lot of new plays, not just with Lamford, but, with Edward Albee, with different playwrights, and I really love that. And to this day, I just did this thing called The Sinner, for television. And the writer of that, Derek Simmons, who went to Yale, he was very inspiring, and I really just approached that as I would approach a play by Lamford, you know what I mean? And that's what I really like to do.
When did the Law and Order job start?
It started, well, just to go back before that, because I think it tells. The first feature film I ever did was Mystic Pizza with Julia Roberts. Mm-hmm. And then that was the first time I did a feature, although I had done these other, I told you that Mound Builders was my first, it was shot in Mystic. But then I did a bunch of features sort of at the end of the 80s. I did Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman. I did, a bunch of things. And so around 1991 or 92, I remember that Jeff Hayes, who was one of the producers. This is before I was chairman.
I remember Jeff.
Yeah, on Law and Order.
Big guy.
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Dick Wolf was the real. So he called me, and I was working on a movie, I think in Puerto Rico actually, and he said, "Do you want to come and do Law and Order?" And the funny thing about it, I'd only really done one other episodic, and that was Molly Dodd with Blair Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And Don Scardino.
Yes.
And
Richard Dresser.
Yes. Writing. Yes.
Yeah.
And Don Scardino was like the showrunner or the producer. So when they were negotiating my contract for Law and Order, they said, "Well, we'll pay you X amount if you commit to a season." And I said to my agent, "Well, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can commit to a season. I just don't know if it's the right thing for me." And they said, "Well, we'll have to pay you less if you don't commit to the whole season." So I said, "Well, just tell them I'll take the lower amount." This is being a true off-Broadway person. And they ended up paying me the higher amount, funnily enough. But I thought it was very clever because then, I was there for 18 seasons because it was on sort of my terms, I guess you could say. I don't know if it was on my terms, but I felt as if I could always leave. But
when they were saying to you then, you got to commit to a season, how many shows were you committing to?
24 shows.
24 shows per year.
Yeah. That's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
And I always continued to do the theater, always. And even movies. Like I've done a lot of movies while I did Law and Order.
Well,
I did a lot of movies.
Or was it kept you in New York?
Yes. Although, funnily enough, yeah. I also taught at Brandeis University for 20 years, teaching twice a month, costume design.
While you were doing that?
I don't know how I did this. I had 2 young children. I commuted on 2 Saturdays a month to Brandeis, and I did Law and Order, and I did plays, and I did film. I've just always been a hard worker. It must have been Mr. Steinman's fault. But anyway, yeah. So I have a lot of students who've gone on who I mentor. I always like to mentor people. I still do that. But yeah, I don't know how we got off on that.
And was the Law and Order, you were starting with the pilot?
No. Actually, the movie I was doing when he called me in Puerto Rico was called Captain Ron with Kurt Russell and Martin Short. And he called me. I was driving around to Old San Juan when he called me. Jeff Hayes. No, I did not do the first season or the second.
Oh, okay.
They were having, whatever problems. Yeah. But so it was the 3rd season to the end. But that was before Jerry Orbach
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I had done, other television and film, of course, before that. I love doing Law and Order, and I sort of miss it in a way. Because I just approached it, when I started it, this is really, it's connected to Off-Broadway, I guess. But I realized, I said to myself, there's so many characters, but every episode is like doing a new play.
Yeah.
And I thought, you could either just, when you're doing the one character, like the garbage guy, let's say, that's, it doesn't matter. Or, you can treat every character as if it's very important and every episode is very important, which is what I chose to do. And interestingly enough, when I went back to do the theater, when I was doing Law and Order, I think it just actually sharpened my instincts, Law and Order did. Rather, because it's so fast, as you remember, it's so fast that you just have to really trust your instincts and if you're doing everything the best that you can, then when I found when I was back doing the theater, while I was doing Law and Order, that I found that was a positive thing. Mm-hmm. And also the ability to get things done very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I probably got that from Circle. Yes.
You worked right about this time with the young playwrights.
Yes, I did. Don Scardino again.
Was that coming out of Circle Rep, or was this?
No, there was nothing to do with when I was involved. It was Playwrights Horizons.
Oh,
And I did a bunch of plays at Playwrights Horizons too.
And
Scardino.
the Triplex Theater.
Well, that was a Marshall Mason and Danny Irvine. The Caligula. Oh, you were asking me about a bad experience. Okay, that was not a
Caligula
great
and the
experience.
Mound Builders.
It wasn't the Mound Builders.
Oh, okay.
No.
Caligula.
And what the other thing is not the Mound Builders. It's a play about
Quiet in the Land.
yes, which is about the Amish.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny Irvine directed that, and Marshall directed Caligula, and it was just overly ambitious. It just was kind of a disaster for many reasons.
Uh-huh.
And that was 1980. I want to say that was 86.
86. Yeah. In the Fallen City.
If I hadn't looked at that, I wouldn't remember doing it. Yeah.
In This Fallen City.
That's Circle Rep.
Uh huh.
That's the one where my husband said, "You designed this," and I said, "No, I didn't."
He said what?
He said, "You designed it." I said, "No, I didn't." So I don't remember much.
And you worked with John Bishop with the musical comedy Murders.
That was a lot of fun. That was 40s, and it moved to Broadway.
That was a wonderful show.
Yeah, I loved doing that.
Bobo Lewis.
Yes, and Pamela Dunlap. And
yes.
Yeah, it was really... Bobo Lewis was a wonderful circle. She was in Him that won the E. Cummings play.
Oh.
As was Tanya Berezin. I worked with Tanya Berezin many when she was acting.
Uh-huh.
Of course, she was in the Mound Builders.
Yeah.
Now she teaches acting. And the funny thing, a little anecdote, my daughter Lucy, as a comedian, she wanted to take an acting class. So she said to me, "Mom, my friend is taking a class with this person named Tanya." I'm like, "Tanya Berezin." It's like a circle. And she's studying with her, and she just loves her.
She's a wonderful studio, not very far from
here.
Yeah.
Apparently, Lucy says she's a wonderful teacher.
She's very good, and she was our acting coach on All My Children, I think.
Really?
And also on Loving.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
You also have had a very, so many. Yeah.
How about the Heidi Chronicles?
That was originally done. It was Dan Sullivan, and it was originally done at Playwrights.
Uh-huh.
And then it moved to Broadway. And I'd actually done another Wendy play before that, Isn't It Romantic? Which
yes, I remember
the first version of it.
At Playwrights, when Andre was still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Andre was still, and I've gone on to work at Lincoln Center with Andre.
Uh-huh.
I've done a bunch of off-Broadway there.
I saw Isn't It Romantic after they moved it. I can't remember what theater they moved it to, but it was...
Well, I think that was a different Isn't It Romantic than I did. I did an original incarnation of it, and then it was sort of refigured.
Uh-huh. Oh.
So, yeah. Which I didn't do the second version.
Later Life.
That's Don Scardino.
And Pete Gurney.
Yes, yes. Wonderful guy. I'm so sad about Pete Gurney.
Yeah.
He always remembered that my dad was a Dante scholar. Whenever I would see him, yeah. But anyway, yes. And so Later Life, and there's two Pete Gurneys that. Well, I'll tell you what. Everything I did at Playwrights. Well, myself, that comes later. Cheever Evening, also Don Scardino directed.
Uh-huh.
Those were both wonderful experiences. I believe it was Cheever Evening. Or it might have been later. One of them moved to the West Side. And then I did something called Plunge at Playwrights Horizon. And I did, well, this is further, and you're going.
It's all right. Go ahead.
I also did The Pain in the Itch, Bruce Norris, with Anna DiShapiro directing.
Uh-huh.
And I did Me, Myself, and I with Emily directing and Edward Albee play.
Uh-huh. And Kinder Transport, which was that had Manhattan Theater Club.
That was really a great experience. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's really interesting because it's about the Kinder Transport was where they took children from Germany to save their lives and place them with British families. Mm-hmm. That was what it was about. fact, people who had been involved in the Kindertransport came to see it, and I loved doing that. It was so good. It was really, really good. I think maybe Santo did the set. I'm not sure, but yeah.
And it was very successful.
Very successful, but it didn't really. It just stayed where.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done so many things for Manhattan Theatre Club, actually. That being one of them. Even very recently.
Uncommon Women and Others.
Phoenix, and then that moved.
And that moved, but this is 94. This is quite a bit.
That's
later.
Carol Rothman's version, which was done at. It was still called the Theatre de Lis, and it was a remounting of it that Carol directed.
About this time, 1995, you did Don Juan in Chicago.
Yes, at your theater.
And
Wasn't that fun?
I love that
was
play.
Great. With J. Smith Cameron, who I just adore. And I remember she had this huge dress, remember, in the first act?
Yes.
There wasn't really room, and so she would go out onto the fire escape behind, put it on. But I love that play. I thought that play was just genius, and I loved it, and it made me laugh so hard.
Yeah, and it was a lovely production.
Yeah.
Because it started present day, but then they go back in time
to Don Juan,
to Don Juan's age.
And then back to the present, I think. Well, anyway, but I really loved doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a lot, and it was just a nice mix of all of that.
I think you skipped ahead of a bunch of stuff.
Oh, well, let's go back, please, because it's not all on the Lortel list. But,
well, I was just, okay. That's the only thing I've done at primary stage, and that was Robert Stanton directed it.
Yes, yeah.
Because then, well, just to go through, well, we'll come back to Lincoln Center, but Manhattan Theatre Club, I also did New England by Richard Nelson, The Lucky Spot by Beth Henley, In the Hands of Its Enemy, Linda I did recently, Lynn directing. I've worked with Lynn for so many years, I did Close of Play, was written by, that's the one, British guy who I don't remember his name, Lynn directed. And then I did the Miss Firecracker Contest we talked about, Kindertransport, and more recently, you'll come to that, I did Ripcord, Prodigal Son with John Patrick Shanley, and Linda most recently. We'll come back to Lincoln Center, Playwrights we talked about, New York Shakespeare Festival we talked about that. Second Stage we've not talked about.
Let's talk about Second Stage.
I did Some Americans Abroad by Richard Nelson. And I did that championship season. I did Danny in the Deep Blue Sea that Lee Silverman directed by John Patrick Shanley. And then I worked at the Actors Studio too.
Most of your Second Stage work then was with Second Stage once they landed on 43rd Street.
Yes, but I worked uptown there too. I did a play that Lynn directed that was kind of a bad experience, not because of Lynn, and I can't remember what it's called. But
at Second Stage, Lynn Meta?
It was at that theater, the theater where it was on 76th Street.
Yes, above the Promenade.
The Promenade. I worked at the Promenade.
At the Promenade, I see.
Yeah, but Second Stage, it's funny, on there I did Dark Rapture that Eric Overmyer wrote.
Yeah.
That Scott Ellis directed with Marissa Tomei. It's his signature down there, but it was uptown in that theater. It was at the Promenade.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. So I don't know. I was thinking maybe the signature produced it early on, but it could be,
but it doesn't sound right because
No.
it doesn't sound like Eric Overmyer and Signature. I don't think he ever worked at Signature. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love him, and he also
Yes.
worked on Law and Order.
And many other TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Treme, I think. Yeah, he's very talented.
Very much so, yeah.
But okay.
Was that championship season obviously a revival?
Yes.
I saw that at the 43rd Street,
Yes.
I believe. Yeah.
Yes, Some Americans Abroad was also 43rd Street and Danny in the Deep Blue Sea. I thought I did something uptown there too.
Tell us about working at the Gramercy Theater all over.
Well, that was the Roundabout, really. That was Emily. Even it was when the Roundabout owned that theater, and it was Edward Albee, and it was Emily Mann.
The Gramercy Theater?
Maybe it's written wrong. It was on 23rd Street.
Uh-huh. Huh. Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was roundabout. And I had also
They had
done,
it for a few seasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also did at the roundabout 1,000 Clowns. Originally, Gene Sachs was directing it, and then he was replaced by Scott Ellis.
Uh-huh.
Um,
How about Third at Lincoln Center?
well, that was I've done a lot at Lincoln Center since then, which we can talk about. But, well, that was extremely meaningful to me because I had done a lot of plays with Wendy, and that was her last play. And she was very ill at the time. None of us, even Dan Sullivan, didn't know that she literally died not long after Third.
Uh-huh.
It was a wonderful play with Diane Least, who I've first worked with in what I was telling you about Leave It to Beaver is Dead at the New York Shakespeare Festival that Des McAnuff directed, but also Law and Order, and I also worked on Third.
When did you start working at Lincoln Center?
The first, well, actually the first time I ever did anything there was Third. And then I've only ever worked off-Broadway there at the Mitzi House, and I did Dada Wuff Papa Hot by Peter Purnell, who I knew from Circle Rep. And Scott Ellis directed that, and I did Domesticated that Anna D. Shapiro directed, and that's Bruce Norris again.
Uh-huh.
And those, I think, are the only things I've done at the Mitzi House, those three. And, yeah. But it was nice to work there because Andre, I knew him from Playwrights.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're working 20th Century Blues now
Yeah.
for
Emily's
directing, and it's Susan Miller.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Beowulf Borat is doing the set, and I never worked with him before, so I'm excited about that.
Wonderful designer.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about that show.
Well, it's kind of like Uncommon Women and Others, except the women are in their 60s, and it has it has Catherine Grody in it, who I actually knew because I worked with her husband, but I never worked with her, so I look forward to. Well, I may have worked with her on Law and Order, but I never did a play with her. But it has Polly Draper in it, and I worked with her at the Young Playwrights Festival. In fact, the play that she was in, I think, was about these people that gathered on the Empire State Building, and the world was coming to an end, and they were from all different walks of life. And she had this fabulous gold pleated dress that was just like so skinny that she had to put it on right before she went on stage because she couldn't walk up the stairs in it. So I'm looking forward to working with her again. And I also did a play with her, and this I tried to find, and I can't because I was trying to do my homework for that.
Uh-huh.
There was a theater on Union Square, and I did an off-Broadway play there, a 2-character play that Polly was in. That was after that was. But anyway, so
That was you're speaking of the Union Square Theater.
yes, it was a
the old
commercial.
Tammany Hall.
A commercial off-Broadway
Yes,
show.
right. Yeah.
Can't remember. And Ellen Parker is in 20th Century Blues, and she was in the
great.
original production of Uncommon Women and Others. So that's kind of a nice circle. But it's about women in their 60s, sort of coming to terms with that. And so it really reminds me a lot of Uncommon Women and Others. And it's kind of, being a woman in my 60s, it's kind of fun. Like I was the right age for Uncommon Women, and now I'm the right age for this. So that's kind of fabulous. Yeah.
I'm going to throw a few theaters at you, and the Actors Playhouse. You did plays with.
The Actors Studio, I did plays.
Okay.
I did a play, the Wakefield plays with Israel Horowitz's plays, and Michael Moriarty was in it. That was before I did Law and Order, but that was at the Actors Studio.
Uh-huh. The Acorn Theater.
No, that's right underneath.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
The acting company.
The Actors
I only
Studio.
did one play, and Brian Murray directed it,
Uh-huh.
and it was, I can't remember.
APA Phoenix.
Well, that's Uncommon Women and Others, and yeah, etc.
Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Well, that's the BAM, and that's not on here. And I did a production of Oedipus Rex that Ming did the set for, and that Emily directed.
Tell us about working with Ming.
Well, I love Ming. He did the Glass Menagerie. I did Guthrie also.
Guthrie,
And I just love working with him. He's very respectful, and we just got along really, really well. And he would tell me things, but I could tell him things. And he's a wonderful guy. I love him. I also did something called He and She that Emily directed at the BAM, and a play that Ulla Grossbart directed, and I can't remember what it was.
At BAM.
Yeah.
We talked about circle repertory, the circle in the square, Equity Library Theater.
Now, I think actually, I probably shouldn't have checked that off, because when I was thinking about this play that I did at the Cabiculo, I felt it was produced by the Equity Library Theater.
Could have been. I think they might have been there for a bit before they went to 104th Street.
Yes, I think so. So I'm sorry. I'd have to
you worked at the Goodman Theater.
Yes, I did Tally's Folly at the Goodman, and just recently, like last year, I did, I'd done Disgrace by Ayad Akhtar on Broadway, and it was done at the Goodman. So I went back there again, so that was great. I worked at many, many regional theaters. A lot of them are not on that list, but I could tell you all of them probably.
Well, you had quite a few plays at the Guthrie.
Yes. I worked at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park under Michael Murray. That was the artistic director at that time. I worked at Hartford Stage, of course, McCarter and Long Wharf. I worked at Long Wharf since my apprentice days. I worked...
Yale Rep?
Never at the Yale Rep.
Never at Yale Rep?
Yeah. Well, I didn't go to the drama school,
Yeah.
so no. They have lots of designers, so I never worked there.
The Hudson Guild.
Well, the Hudson Guild, the only time I ever worked there was the off-Broadway production of Da by Hugh
Oh,
Leonard
wonderful.
with Barnard Hughes,
show.
and then it moved to Broadway.
Did you go to Broadway
Yes,
then?
yes.
Oh, that was a wonderful show.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was a great, great experience, and then it went on tour too.
Yeah.
But that was started at the Hudson Guild. And I really learned something on that, because when I read the play, I thought, of course I said yes, but singing is not the greatest play I've ever read. But then at the first rehearsal, when I heard it read, I thought, whoa, it just came to love. It was amazing. So I thought that's a learning experience.
I read that play and I find it to be really wonderful.
I don't know, maybe I was having a bad day.
Yeah.
But it's just the difference between reading it and then seeing it, even just at the first reading. Yeah. Not to put the play down, that was really to do with me more than anything.
And we talked about Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
The Little Schubert Theater.
No, I think, isn't that also was called the 22 Steps?
Might be. The Little Schubert is on 42nd Street.
No, but
Okay.
I think, is there something underneath that is what I checked off? It's not the Little Schubert, because I think I thought maybe that was the 22 Steps, which is on 44th Street.
Oh, don't know. We talked about the Long Wharf and the Lucille Lortel and the Theatre de Lys.
Yeah.
Manhattan Theatre Club we discussed.
The joy of Manhattan Theatre Club for me is that I have really off and on done so many plays there over the years. Just really wonderful.
In many different spaces.
In many different spaces.
New York Shakespeare Festival, we talked about
that.
Playwrights Horizons.
Talked about that.
Primary
Stages. About that.
We talked about that. The Roundabout.
Yeah.
Second Stage.
Yeah.
Signature.
Well, now I'm working there. I don't think I think Dark Rapture was just done at the Promenade. That's what I think.
Theatre de Lys, which is really the Lucille Lortel.
Right.
Theatre 4.
I did something called The Glorious Age there. Very early, kind of big break for me. And that's the one that was the man who created Godspell. He directed it and he wrote it. It was kind of a medieval Godspell.
John Michael Teplin.
Yes, and Don Scardino was the lead.
And the theater, about what years?
Early. I'd say it was about 74 or 5.
And they were using it as a commercial off-Broadway house then, right?
Yes.
Because I think I
Yes.
saw Inspector Hounds there the
Yes.
year before. So.
And the producer, whose name I think is there, yeah, I remember her. Really well.
Dorothy Olin? Or,
Yes.
Yeah, Dorothy Olin, yeah. The Vineyard Theater.
I did work at the Vineyard, and I also can't remember what I did there. I'm so sorry.
And we
Supposedly,
talked about the West Side Arts.
yeah.
They had a lot of theaters.
Thank you. I feel guilty that I tried to do my homework, but I
You
feel
did,
guilty
though.
that I don't remember every single play.
Well, you remembered a
But
lot
it is
of them.
40 years. It's longer than 40 years. It's 40
Have you ever figured out, totaled up how many professional shows you've done?
You mean counting film, television, and no. But it must be many, many. I should do that. Well, I wish I'd take it because I remember John Lee, baby. I was very close to his parents as he was close to my parents because we knew each other from very, early 20s, starting at Circle. His mother told him to write down everything he ever did. Whether he's done that or not, I would keep forgetting to ask him. But I think that was great advice, and I wish I'd done it. I guess I could try to do
Not
it.
too late. You can,
No,
you
no.
can start doing it now.
I know.
Is there anything that you can think of that we have not covered?
I don't think so. I
What's
mean,
different for a costume designer trying to get started today than when you started out?
well, that's hard for me to say because, I do think in Off-Broadway it was a little more kind of down and dirty than it is now, and now it's a little not so far from Broadway, so I think it's hard to, when you have Anne Roth or Santo D'Acosta designing Off-Broadway, people are starting out, it's hard to get jobs.
Uh-huh.
There's off-Broadway too, but, I think my ability to get to work at Circle Rep, Circle, it was very kind of casual, although it was very, very committed.
Mhm.
And I think it was easier to kind of fall into things, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. I think the stakes are higher now because things are more expensive than they were. And I also think, and I say this in the kindest way, and I'm sure it's not true of your theater, but I do think some theaters have become a little bit filled with bureaucracy, where there's a zillion production meetings. It's all very, and it's different than it was, and I'm not sure it's better.
Mhm.
I don't know if that comes from the regional theaters or, but when you work in some regional theaters and they, suddenly everybody's, got their lunch and putting it in the microwave, you know what I mean? It's different than, say, when I first started out, when you just kind of work.
Uh-huh.
I don't mean that we wouldn't take breaks, but, I think that there's a lot of situations where it's sort of bureaucratic now in a way it didn't used to be. I'm sure it wasn't very bureaucratic at Cafe Chino, which was before my time, but, it's just evolved into, I would say, and I don't, do you edit this?
Sometimes, yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, I love doing 20th Century Blues. I couldn't be happier. I love working with them. I love Susan Miller. I love everything about it. But there's so many production meetings that I'm going to on the phone that and which is wonderful. They're very organized. But I don't know.
It's different now.
Yeah,
It's different. Yeah.
maybe it's
Yeah.
better. I don't know.
What would you say to somebody starting out now?
I just say work really hard and just do everything you can do. Because I have many students, and many of which are doing well. That's what I would tell them. I think you.
Are you still teaching?
No, I haven't
formally?
taught for at least 5 years,
Mhm.
which is good because I've actually gone out of town more to do stuff.
Yeah.
Both for theater and for television. Although I don't really go out to the regional, I really can't. Like when I worked at the Guthrie, I had to commit way ahead of time, and I can't really do that anymore. But yeah, I feel. Yeah, I haven't taught for about 5 years, but I did teach for 20. But just twice a month. But I love doing that because as a way to give back and be a mentor. And I really am very in touch with all my former students. They're doing all sorts of interesting things. And, I've also tried to mentor people that weren't my students. Like my assistant on 20th Century Blues, which I'm thrilled to be doing. I didn't mean to be negative and say they were doing production meetings. I really wasn't. But because I love working with Emily, and I really love the play, and I love the actors. But anyway, my assistant started working for me, as a production assistant, driving me for a television show, and she's worked her way up, and now she's a union assistant, really good. And I love stuff like that.
When you were doing Law and Order, you're on location so much of the time.
Well,
Are you?
not as much as other circumstances. Like the Sinner that I just did was almost all location.
Yeah.
But
You're working out of some home base there.
yes. We
A
had
shop,
office shop in
offices and stuff.
Greenpoint.
Yeah.
I think for a costume designer, one thing I've always felt, even though I've done so many television shows, I've always felt very conflicted between being on set and not being on set. But the fittings are very, very important to me. And there are costume designers in television. And I think I'm a very rare costume designer in television. There are very few of us who also do theater. They exist. Tom Brokaw would be one of them, but it's rare. But the fittings are very important to me, and I do them all. And not every costume designer in television does, but because I'm doing, and I like to do a lot of times, if it's a shop show, I like to do my own shopping because it helps me kind of sculpt, and I've always been that way, and create the character in my head if I'm not going to sketch it. And so you can't be everywhere all the time, so sometimes I'm on set and sometimes I'm not. And sometimes on a television show I might do the fittings on the wardrobe truck, but yeah. In Law and Order used to be 8 days. Law and Order was kind of so well, so kind of set that, anyway, it used to be about 4 days on set and about 4 days on location. Yeah. Whereas The Sinner that I just did was very rarely on the set. It was, so that was different.
But they could do, 4 days in the courtroom, basically.
Well, and also
in the squad room.
Yes. And then there'd be 4 days out.
4 days out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had a shop there, and I would do my fittings pretty much there. Although, as I say, there are circumstances where I just do fittings. Okay.
You have worked with many playwrights, playwrights on many new plays.
That's right. I love that. That gives me joy. And I've carried that into all areas, film. I did a couple of movies with Rebecca Miller, Arthur Miller's daughter. And that was really fun because she writes her own and directs them. But yes, I've worked with many playwrights, and that's been a joyful thing for me. So that's inspired me.
Anything we've missed that you can think of?
Well, I don't think so. I could probably go home and think of things, but is there anything else that you wanted to ask me, or?
I don't think so. I think this is pretty clear.
It's really fun. I feel very blessed to do what I do, and I love being able. I feel very lucky that I've been able to do all kinds of things, and that that's what I really like to do. And because one of the hard things about doing television, doing theater, off-Broadway, Broadway, and doing film, is that there's not many people that do that. I mean, Santa would be an example of someone who does. But because of that, sometimes I think people might forget that I'm doing theater, or, like people like to sort of pigeonhole you into doing one thing or another, which is something that I've never really been part of, Like, I did Law and Order for so long, and I haven't done it now it's been gone for I don't know. But there are people in the theater who think I'm just doing Law and Order, you know. Fortunately, not too many. But that's sort of an interesting aspect of it. Or there might be people that, anyway.
It's tricky to juggle all of that, though.
Yes.
But I have found that bosses are usually understanding.
Yes.
They're understanding that
Yes.
if you're in television, they want you to be doing the theater. So
Yes.
yeah,
Well, I've just gone ahead and
just done it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm very hands-on, so I've never been the kind of designer who's absentee.
Yeah.
That's just not. I'm always very conscientious and hardworking and being there. I never have been sort of just absent and had my assistant do it. Never.
Yeah. Huh.
In any of the three areas. So, because what's the point?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Great.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about working with Julie Babasso.
Well, she was kind of amazing, and she wrote that Down by the River Where Water Lilies Are something every day, and that was a wonderful circle rep. She was always kind of a little crazy, but in a positive way. And then I did this production of Angelo's Wedding. Speaking of difficult situations, I mean, didn't find it difficult, but she was not happy with one of the actors' performances, and she, Julie would never hold back. And she was very angry about it, and so it all got crazy, and the police had to be called, and they canceled. And of course, Circle Rep, God love them, they really didn't worry. They were the opposite of what I was talking about, bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't worry about that. They just worried about the art. And somehow this actor, who I won't say who it was, but kind of a movie actor, he hadn't signed his contract, and he was in Angela's Wedding. And Julie Babasso was like screaming, in the lobby about how he was ruining her play. So, and the police had to be called. And
She went over and she stopped the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he hadn't signed his contract, and he just walked. Of course, Circle, that was the last thing they worried about.
And that closed the show,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that was an adventure. But, she was kind of an amazing.
She was very talented.
Very talented.
In many different areas.
Yes.
As an actress, as a writer.
Yes, really like a
Actor.
genius,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But, there's so many different playwrights and things.
And talk a little bit about working with Michael Warren Powell.
Well, I really, I knew Michael Warren Powell, but funnily enough, with Circle East and everything, I never really worked with him that much at Circle Rep, although I knew him. But I don't know why. But at the time when I worked most intimately with him, funnily enough, was when he was on Law and Order, and I was designing, and he was in an episode where he played the lead, and it was a very troubled character, and he just was brilliant.
Mm.
And I enjoyed him so much. It was kind of a nice thing for me because even though I knew of him so much from Circle, we really didn't work together that much. And so it was kind of wonderful to have that time with him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you, on Law and Order, work with a lot of theater directors?
Not that many.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are certain theater directors who really do crossover. Don Scardino would be a prime example. He's just done everything you can think of, and I love him. But a lot of theater, TV directors, not of course Ed Sheeran. He's the ultimate theater director, and to my feeling is that if there hadn't been Ed Sheeran, Law and Order would have ended many, many years before it did. Because he ran Law and Order as if it were a theater, and he was the artistic director. And he was so strong that he could really stand up, I think, to the network, and if he had to, I don't know, I never was aware of that, but when he came to work at Law and Order, he had directed there, but when he became the showrunner, he changed it so that they would do kind of like a rehearsal and read-throughs that they had never done before. And I think before he came, there would be times on the set where the actor and the director would get into a discussion. It'd be like midnight, and they'd never really been addressed, and production would stop, which is really a problem. But because Ed was so smart that he, you know, these things were addressed ahead of time.
I remember him making a point of making the actors read through all of their scenes
That's right.
the week before.
That's right.
And he said, if there's questions, I want them now.
Yeah.
I want them right now.
Yeah.
Get 'em- And the writer was there.
Yes.
So, okay, we'll go back and we'll work on this. So.
Yes. Yes. So, interestingly enough, Rene Balsay, did you meet him when you were there? He's like the person who's written more Law and Order than anyone. He just wrote this Menendez Brothers that's on now. I think his wife, when I went to Ming's 80th birthday, Rene was there because his wife is like a cousin of Ming's. It was like so funny. But anyway, small world in many ways. Yeah. Anyhow.
All right.
Thank you so much.